Hi. Let's continue the story of the book of Shmuel Aleph, 1 Samuel, and this lady Channah at the Tabernacle or the Mishkan at Shiloh. And we saw that Shiloh actually is kind of in the middle of the land of Israel. In fact, let's put it back up on the map. Let's see. Okay. Let's get images. Okay. So, let's pick, this one's good. It doesn't exactly have Shiloh. Okay. Anyway, let me just pull Shiloh up here. Okay. So this is not far from Jerusalem. Since it's the center of Israel, it seems like a distance because that's all the map is showing. But actually we came in through Jericho, the walls of Jericho, and then eventually worked our way to Shiloh. Today in modern day Israel, which is really what these cities are, they're pointing to the Jew. It's an interesting, for those of you that don't know Israel's geography, it's worth a minute. This green is the Mediterranean Sea. This line is the Jordan River. Jew haters, like at many universities, who demonstrate against Israel, BDS, they want to boycott Israel, they have a slogan. The slogan is, from the river to the sea, Palestine shall be free. From the river, this is the river, Jordan River, to the sea, this is the sea, Mediterranean, Palestine shall be free. Well, if between the river and the sea, you have Palestine, where does Israel fit it? And the answer is, it does not. It's a nice way of saying, destroy Israel. And what happens to the 6.5 million Jews living in Israel once you go ahead and destroy it to create a Palestine? They don't say it, but their answer is, those 6.5 million Jews also go into the sea, drown them, kill them all. That was Gamal Abdel Nasser. He said it openly, leading into the 1967 Six-Day War of 50 years ago. He said it openly, drive the Jews into the sea. When college kids at UC Irvine, as well as USC, University of Southern California, and around the United States, there's about 20 Duke University, about 20 universities whose student bodies, student government have voted to boycott Israel. They don't know what the hell's going on. None of them has been in Israel. They don't know what river, what sea. For all they know, it's the Mississippi River, and it's the sea of any sea, who knows? The Red Sea. They have no idea what's going on. They have no idea where Israel is located. They have no idea what's going on in Israel. And they have no idea what goes on with the Arabs. On the one hand, they're for gay rights. They have no idea that Arab Muslim countries execute people for being gay. And the way they do it is with defenestration. I don't know whether you know the word defenestration. Defenestration is when someone throws you out a window. Interesting, huh? In several Arab countries, they take people accused of being gay, you accuse them, you put them on trial, you find them guilty of being gay, lesbian, homosexual. They don't even get to transgender. No one's doing sex change operations in Saudi Arabia. And they take them up to a high floor and they throw them over. So that's what they would have if they replaced Israel with another Arab country. By the way, since the people who advocate destroying Israel tend to be left of center, they don't realize it, but the Arab countries are right-wing extreme. You think white supremacists are a problem here. You haven't seen right-wing extremism till you've been in the Arab world, where women are not allowed to drive cars simply because they're women, not even allowed to take the driver's test. They have to stand when they walk in the street. They're only allowed to go in many countries if their husbands are there, and they have to stay at least 3 feet behind the husband while walking. You want to talk about misogyny and women's rights and Me Too? The worst kind of attacks on women are not only tolerated, they're part of the Arab Muslim culture. You want to call it Islamophobia, hatred of Muslims to say it? What can I tell you? That's the facts. It's known as honor killings. If an Arab feels, a Muslim Arab feels, that his sister has brought shame to the family, not only by marrying a Christian or a Jew, but simply by dating one, or in any way goes out dressed immodestly, depending on the family, every so often, her brother will kill her, or her father will kill her. It's called an honor killing. And there's no trials. Or there's a trial and it's like disorderly conduct. You could look it up after class. Arab, honor killing. Muslim, honor killing. When these students at campuses demonstrate against Israel, wanting to replace Israel, and by the way, most of them don't even understand the ramifications of saying from the river to the sea, Palestine shall be free. They don't even realize, half of them, that they're calling for the death of Israel. But this is Israel. And it's good to just have an idea of its geography. I said, Jerusalem, Yerushalayim, is very hilly. I always knew it's hilly because it's in the Bible. In the Tanakh, they always talk about the hills of Jerusalem. Hare Yerushalayim, Hare Yehuda. Odishama bi'are Yehuda, uvachutzot Yerushalayim. That's the cities, but rhyming with the word are is Hare. And Hare means hills. You can even see on this map a little topography. It's a little bit bumpy in the middle. Jerusalem is hilly. It's a little bit like San Francisco. I didn't fully appreciate it till about 2-3 years ago when Rebbitzin Ellen and I spent 10 days in Israel. A wonderful, wonderful opportunity we had to be together in Israel. And we were based in Yerushalayim, and we walked some of the streets. Man, oh man, oh man. That is like San Francisco, where it's paved. It's a city. There's cars, but you're really pointing down. And it felt like you're walking uphill both ways. I don't know how that happens. Beit Lechem is right nearby, also in Judea. We said the so-called West Bank. When you say a bank of a river, the implication is like the beach. That West Bank goes out to here. It's like the whole country, because the United Nations gave Israel very little land. So although she's the size of New Jersey, she used to be the size of Delaware. So you have Beit Lechem, and these are now in the so-called Palestine Authority, Ramallah, not to be confused with Ramleh. Ramleh is a Jewish city. Ramallah is the capital of the Palestine Authority. Shiloh, the southern half of the so-called West Bank is Judea, Yehuda. The northern half is called Shomron, Samaria. In biblical times, Shiloh was the capital. Now the capital, there is no capital. It's part of Judea, Samaria. But this is a Shechem, what we call Shechem, the Arabs call Nablus, Nablus. It's a city in Palestine Authority. Jenin is a terror hotbed. Just as people talk about Chicago shootings on Saturday nights, Jenin is an absolutely out of control terror center. Beit Shan is Jewish, so the map is like a gerrymandered congressional district, where you have parts extend out and then parts are back to Jewish again. Now, the biggest cities in Israel, all are on the Mediterranean. So it's a great place to go as a tourist, even if you're not a Jew or a Christian who's interested in going and visiting where Jesus walked. It's a pretty cool tourist site because all the big cities have great beaches, if you're into that. And a lot of people are. So the most famous is Tel Aviv. Tel Aviv is not even in the Bible. It's a modern city. It was not even built on biblical ruins. Shiloh is. Shiloh is, we're going to learn it. Shechem, that's where Joseph is buried. And Yaakov was there. And others were there. And Jericho was in the Bible. Most, some of these cities are modern. Tel Aviv, tel means mountain or hill, or actually smaller than that, mound. Really more like a mound. Aviv is spring. So it's like a small mound, they call it. Yaffo was the biblical city. So they sort of, if you've been like out here in California, if you've ever been to like Old Town, if you ever go to like the city of Orange, there's Orange. Many have heard of Orange County. Well, there's the city of Orange, which is the capital of Orange County. And right a little part, like the 2-3 blocks of the city of Orange, there's Old Town Orange. You may have seen the same in Pasadena. If you go up north of LA to the San Fernando Valley and east, there's Pasadena. And then there's those like 3 blocks of Old Town Pasadena. And like if we were at Santa Fe or was it Albuquerque, Old Town New Mexico's. So Yaffo is like Old Town Tel Aviv. Looks like what it was hundreds of years ago. Then Herzliya is named for Theodore Herzl. And it's on the beach. Gorgeous city. Netanya is named for Nathan Strauss, who died on the Titanic. His family donated a fortune towards helping build the modern state as it was starting. So Netanya, Nathan, and the wife Channah is the city of Pardes Channah. And then there's Hadera. Hadera is famous because Hadera was a swampland, sort of like Panama when we built the Panama Canal. And they had a real yellow fever problem, mosquitoes. And they could not get rid of the mosquitoes. And they didn't know what to do. And there was a scientist named Dr. Hillel Yaffe. You know, Jews in science, Jews in medicine, Jews and, well, more Jews per capita have been awarded Nobel Prizes than any other people. Dr. Hillel Yaffe discovered a scientific way to get rid of mosquitoes because they couldn't get rid of them. He started to study and determined what trees need more water than any other trees. And he figured out the tree that needs the most water is the eucalyptus. And he proposed that they plant a gazillion eucalyptus trees in Hadera. He said, according to the science, those trees are going to suck out all the water. People said, that's crazy. I mean, it's nice, we'll do it, we'll try, and it worked. And what they did was they got the Rothschilds to put up the money for the trees. I mean, it's one thing to say, let's plant the trees, but still costs money. Otherwise, you're barking up the wrong tree, and then you're stumped. So what ended up happening is they got the Rothschilds to put up the money to buy the trees and plant the trees. And so the whole area has lots of cities named for Rothschilds. Netanya, you have, as I said, Pardes Channah and others like that. Okay. Now, all of these have in common is they are what's known as the Chof HaMishor, the coastal plain. And that means it's flat, straight land. So if you have trouble walking up and down heights and hills, let's say you're to San Francisco and you say, I love visiting Lombardy Street, but man, I couldn't walk there. I couldn't do that every day. This would be the place for you. Hadera, Netanya, Herzliya, Kfar Saba, which means grandfather's city. And Netanya is particularly popular with English-speaking Jews. So among Jews from around the world who've moved to Israel, A lot end up in Yerushalayim and Tel Aviv, but an interesting number end up in Netanya, which is very, very popular for what's known as Dovrei Anglit, the Anglophones, people from the United States, Canada, South Africa, Australia, New Zealand, although I've met Jews from New Zealand, and I don't think they talk English. I don't know what the heck that language is, but let me tell you, Mike, it ain't English. In Britain, in Ireland, in Scotland, okay. And then as you go down south, you still have, in the southern part, Ashdod. And even more down there, you have Eilat, and starts with an E. She starts with an Aleph. Going blank a moment. Half of you probably know what I'm referring to. Eilat, that's Eilat. And Ashkelon and Eilat. So anyway, our story takes place in Shiloh. Jerusalem has not yet been rebuilt, and David HaMelech is not yet alive. We just got there. We went through the judges, and we have not yet displaced the Yevusim, the Jebusites, who live there. It's one of the very few cities we have not yet displaced so that we can go ahead and control it. So the Beit HaMikdash has not yet been built, and the Mishkan, the holy sanctuary, sits in Shiloh, stands there, and it will be there 369 years until David HaMelech will have it moved, finally towards Jerusalem, where they will build ultimately under his son Shlomo, King Solomon, a permanent house of God, the Beit HaMikdash. So Jews go to Shiloh for Yom Kippur and Rosh Hashanah, and that's where the special sacrifices. And we continue from last week. We're in chapter 2, and Channah is crying because she has no children, and Penina makes fun of her and really rubs it in. And it's really hard stuff. So, V'chein ya'aseh shana b'shana midei alotah b'beit Hashem kein tachisena. The word ka'as means anger, rage. And Penina likes to push Channah's buttons annually to get her angry at the annual family trip to to Shiloh for Rosh Hashanah Kippur. But if Kevel Tochal, she doesn't want to eat. And her husband Elkanah says, we learned the last week, why are you so sad? Am I not worth more than 10 sons? And what could she do? She's a little bit mollified, eats a little bit, Acharei Achla v'Shiloh, and after she eats a little bit in Shiloh, she's back at the wall, Al Mezuzot Tachal Hashem. She's there and she's crying at the wall, praying to God for a baby. Morat Nefesh, she's so sad. The word mar has two meanings in Hebrew. Actually, if you look deeper, you get a lot more meanings. Mar means bitter. It also can mean mister. One has nothing to do with the other unless you don't like men. It's like English. We have certain words that are pronounced the same, even spelled the same, and have utterly different meanings. I was starting last week saying the words night. Night is, the latter half of a day when it's dark outside. On the other hand, Sir Galahad, Sir Lancelot, the Knights of the Round Table. I started telling this last week, and I got off subject, so get onto it now, that they told the story about every chief rabbi, unlike America, Israel has a chief rabbi, and so does England. Jews organize communities the way the majority non-Jewish world does in their country. In the United States, there's not a chief goy. There's not a chief non-Jew. There's not a chief, let's say, pastor. There are a lot of prominent pastors. There used to be Jerry Falwell. There's Pat Robertson. I think he retired. There's a few others. There's Cardinal Dolan in New York as the main Catholic, but there are a few other Catholic cardinals. So there's not like one chief goy in America. So you don't have a chief rabbi. But in the United Kingdom, there is a chief goy. The main non-Jew in the United Kingdom clergy is the Archbishop of Canterbury. And this is going on for 1,000 years or more. You see the movie Becket, where Henry II against Thomas Becket, or other stories where the Henry VIII wanted the permission from the chief goy of England to get divorced, but under Catholicism, you're never allowed to get divorced. So Henry VIII created a new religion, a different denomination of Christianity, which is identical to Catholicism with one difference: you're allowed to get divorced. because that's what he wanted. And they called that Anglican Church, Anglicanism. In the United States, it's known not as Anglicanism, but as Episcopalian. When the British came to the United States as the Pilgrims, and they brought religion with them, they were anti-King George. So in a revolution against England, they don't want to be worshiping Anglican religion, the England religion, so they gave it a different name, Episcopalian. That's their religion. Anyway, so they tell the story, since there's a chief non-Jew in England and the United Kingdom, every British ruled country also has a chief rabbi. There's a chief rabbi of South Africa. Now it's Rabbi Warren Goldstein. There's chief rabbi in Australia. And this chief rabbi of the whole kingdom used to be Lord Jacobovich. And then when he was passed away, it became Lord Rabbi Jonathan Sachs, who passed away from cancer last year. And now it's Rabbi Mervis, Ephraim Mervis. Anyway, part of the situation in England is that after the chief rabbi has been a chief rabbi for a year or two or three, they knight him. They make him a knight. They give him the title Lord. He's allowed to be one of the House of Lords, like Andrew Lloyd Webber and other famous British people and members of the Queen Elizabeth family, although, of course, they had to bounce that guy Andrew. He's in all kinds of trouble the last couple of months. Anyway, they tell the story. You see, when they knight you, you stand, the queen is standing, she's got the sword, and the person bows down on one knee, bows the head, and the queen puts the sword on each shoulder and says, I dub thee knight, Lord whoever. And they tell the story that when it was time for her to knight Lord Jacobovich, and they said, you'll have to bow down now on your knees, he explained that as a Jew does not bow down. We're not allowed. It's like eating pork. A Jew is not allowed to bow down on the knee to a human being. It's as core to the Jewish religion as that we're not allowed to eat pork. We're not allowed to eat on Yom Kippur. We're not allowed to bow down to a person on our knees. That's the famous story of Mordechai in Purim that we're learning with Haman. And so they don't know what to do. For 2,000 years, they've been knighting people. They bow down on the knee to the king or queen. And so the famous line was that when Lord Jacobovich wouldn't bow down, she said, we're going to knight him anyway. I understand the situation. And then someone said, why is this knight different from all other knights? So you have that. Anyway, continuing. So she's filled with bitterness, morat nefesh. That's why it's a little tricky to name your daughter Mara. I've met Jewish girls named Mara, good families. Mar has more than one meaning. There's myrrh, M-Y-R-H-H. That's that sweet smelling fragrance offered at the sacrifice. So Mar has more than one meaning. That's why, because it's a little surprising sometimes to meet a Jewish girl named Mara, especially from a good family, because it could mean bitterness, but it also can mean sweet. Interesting. Sometimes that happens. In fact, another homonym, sweet, could be like sweet like sugar, or it could be a room at a hotel. Sweet. In the 1990s, when they were doing Polish jokes, very unfair. They were saying Polish people are stupid. It was actually 1970s. There's a period of time that a certain kind of joke has popularity. So they were making Polish jokes. The jokes is the Polish people are stupid, like about the Polish astronaut who says he's going to go to the sun, and then someone says, "You idiot! Don't you realize you'll burn alive?" And he says, "That's it. Everybody thinks Polish people are stupid. We're going to go in the nighttime." So anyway, in the same way, there was like a question: what do the following four things have in common? 1948, 1967. 1973, 1982. So the inclination is to say that's the four wars of Israel: 1948, 1967, 1973, 1982. And the answer was those are adjacent rooms in the Warsaw Hilton. Anyway, back to this. So Enough. Let's learn something. Although we have been. She's crying. Bachotivka, we learned it's reinforced crying. She's bitterly wailing. And this was the pasuk we ended with last week. She says, the Lord of hosts. And we learned last week it's the first time in the entire Bible, in the entire world, that anyone ever referred to God as Hashem Tzvaot, Lord of hosts. Imra'otir et, with an emphasis again of a doubling of the verb to really emphasize it. In those days, you don't have italics as a font. If you really will watch God, ba'ani amitacha amatacha, the pain in your maidservant, God, uzachartani, and you'll remember me, v'lo tishkach et amatecha, and you won't forget, please don't forget your maidservant. V'natata li'amatcha zara anashim, please God, give your maidservant the seed, a male seed. So the Talmud is interested how in one sentence of prayer, she uses the word male maidservant 3 times. Amatecha, amatecha, amatcha. So 3 times in one sentence calling herself maidservant, talking about her pain. Zachartani v'lo tishkach, please remember me and don't forget. That's a little repetitive, no? If I remember you, I'm not forgetting you. And give me zera anashim, male seed. What does that mean? On the one hand, to give birth, a woman, of course, will be absorbing male seed, unless this is a miracle, which really does not happen. Leave it at that. And I then will dedicate that boy all the days of his life. I will essentially give him up for adoption to Eli the High Kohen, that he should be the protege and learn how to be a Kohen, or if he's not a Kohen because he's not the son of a Kohen, that he will be as holy as he can be. Umoralo yola el rosho, and I will never let a razor blade touch his head. He'll never get a haircut. He'll be a Nazir. He'll be dedicated to God. And as I pointed out, this is after Shimshon. Samson is the book of Judges. We learned that already. Well, the Talmud, we studied some of it last week, and we continue here. Talmud wants to learn ideas of how do you pray. How should a Jew pray? Tana Rabbanan. This is in Talmud Merachot 31a. I'm doing mostly what we did not do last week. Of course, I want to teach you more things. The rabbis taught, anyone who prays should not just be reading words out of a book. You should have your heart to God. When you say Berchat HaMazon, it should be not only reading or singing words in the Siddur, but you should have in mind, thank you, God, for giving me food. Thank you that I had the money somehow for food. And if I didn't have any money, thank God, someone charitably gave me food. Thank you that the food did not get me sick, but instead gave me nutrition. Thank you for food. If you understand the words, then you understand it much more deeply. You're thanking God for the food, and you're also thanking God that he made you Jewish, that he brought you into the Jewish nation, and he gave you a rich land of Israel, and he will someday rebuild Jerusalem. But at the very least, if you don't understand the meaning of the words, lots of people like to have an English translation, so they could look along as they're reading the Hebrew. But that could be disruptive. It's like sometimes watching TV with the titles on. It's hard to sometimes, you might miss some things in the picture. In the same way, the bottom line is, you should always have your heart towards God. And it continues, and as you see, I'm going quickly. If you pray in a house, you should pray in a house that has windows, near the windows. It's better to pray at the window. And they say that because there are 2 places in the Bible, at least, where people indoors pray to God at a window so they could see outdoors, and they could look towards Jerusalem. In the book of Daniel, let's take a peek. Interesting. Daniel, called Kabel Dona, Malkader Yavich, Risham Ketavavi Asara. And you'll remember the book of Daniel is in Aramaic because it's written in Babylonia. It's one of only 2 or 3 biblical books that are not written in Hebrew. Also the book of Ezra. Likewise, Jews coming from Babylonia to rebuild the temple in Yerushalayim. When Daniel learned it had been put in writing, he went to his house, in whose upper chamber he had windows made facing Jerusalem. He specifically wanted to be able to pray 3 times daily facing Jerusalem. V'chavein petichan le be'ilute neged Jerusalem v'zimnin telata b'yama u'borech al berchohe u'metzale u'mode kadam elahei. And he would, remembering that a lot of Jewish Aramaic has Hebrew in it too, just as Yiddish is really German with Jewish peppered in for flavor. Zimnin, Zamanim, Tilatai taught you, for those who know some Hebrew, that Hebrew, when it's transitioned over to Aramaic, they take the shin and they make it a tav. So Zimnin Tilata is actually Zimnin or Zamanim Shalosh. Shalosh Zamanim, Biyom, 3 times a day. Hu Barech, he would pray, Al Berchohi, on his Berkayim, on his knees. So it's very close to Hebrew. Umetzale, Letzale is to pray. Sale is to pray or to cry out. Umode, he would bow down, Modem Anachnalach, Kadam Elohei, in the presence before his God. Okay, so anyway, we see that he prayed with windows. That way he felt, I don't know that on a clear day you can see forever. I don't know that in Babylonia, looking out the window from Persia, from Iraq, you really could see Yerushalayim. But he felt he could look in that direction. And so the Gemara says, when you pray, the best is to face Yerushalayim and to pray near a window, if the window faces in the direction of Yerushalayim. Let's say we know from California, where we are, and really anywhere in the United States, Israel's to the east. So if the only window in the room you have is in the west, north, or south, no point in praying out that window. But if you have options and you have a window facing east, that's the place to pray, looking outside. So let's see more. So kol yechol yitpalel adam kol hayom kulo. So what should you do? Should you pray 20 hours a day? How much prayer should there be? Should you be praying nonstop? Well, we see it. Kevar mafarasha yedei Daniel. We just learned it in the book of Daniel. Zimnin Talata, you play 3 times a day, morning, afternoon, evening. Okay. And then goes on. And I might have thought one may pray facing any direction. Yachol yitpalel adam l'chol ruach sheyirtza. Talmud lomar lekabel neged Yerushalem. The Talmud says the appropriate direction for prayer is facing Yerushalayim. So synagogues are structured in a way. The architecture of a shul is that it should face, that the front should face east. Sometimes it's not practicable. Sometimes by practicable, I mean, there's a difference between practical and practicable. Practical means what you mean, what you know practical means. Practicable means it's not practical and you really can't do it. It's like 2 things. Not only is it not practical, it's almost impossible. Why don't we just say impossible? It's not impossible, but it sure isn't impracticable. Sometimes a synagogue has a piece of land, like Beth Jacob. Beth Jacob in Irvine, frankly, like my house, when we daven in our house. So let's take Beth Jacob. The piece of land, they initially bought land that had been a bank. What better place to have a synagogue than a bank? So Jews and money. So anyway, they bought a piece of property that is rectangular, not square. One side is more narrow, one side is more wide. If they would have built the sanctuary, the davening place, so that you're facing Yerushalayim, it would be like davening in a train car. So they necessarily built it the other way. You need to ask a rabbi's permission. It preceded me, but any knowledgeable rabbi would have said, that's fine. Because if you're putting in an Aron Kodesh, an ark that holds Torahs, that takes precedence anyway as to which direction to face. If you have a room with the Aron Kodesh, the ark and the Torahs are here, and the wall facing Jerusalem is there, you face the Aron Kodesh. Usually, therefore, they put the Aron Kodesh on the wall towards Jerusalem. If it's the United States, the East. If it's, I don't know, Japan, the West. If they have Jews and shuls in Japan. I'm sure they have a Chabad. So anyway, the precedent of Daniel teaches that he's living in Iraq, then it was Babylonia, and he faced Jerusalem 3 times daily in his prayers, even though he himself never returned to Jerusalem, but he knew that the Jews will return. And indeed, we've learned in our Sunday class, Ezra, the Jews returned by order of King Cyrus, Koresh. Okay, so as they're talking about davening, Yachol Yashmiya Kolo B'Tfilato. When you pray, should you pray audibly so that everyone can hear what you're saying? No, you should pray quietly. You'll be disrupting other people in shul otherwise. What are you, a narcissist? You have 6 people around you, someone on your left, your right, front, back. You're going to pray out loud? How can they concentrate on their own prayers? It's already preceded, just as we're looking at the book of Daniel, to find precedent for prayer and how to pray. You face Jerusalem, you pray 3 times a day, you pray near a window, 3 things in one verse from Daniel. In the same way, there are lots of things to learn from how Channah prayed. So let's get into Channah. Okay. Amar of Hamnuna, Rabbi Hamnuna said, Kame hilchata gibaravata, ika limishma bahani kriya krae dechana. How many laws we have that have redefined the way we pray simply based on the precedent of how Channah prayed. Just as one sentence in Daniel gives us 3 laws for the last 2,000 years and until Mashiach comes, until the Messiah comes. We always will pray facing Jerusalem 3 times daily, ideally near a window facing Jerusalem. Likewise, here's what we learn from Channah. Mikan limit palel tzorchichavin liba. First of all, we learn that you have to pray with deep meaning from your heart. She was crying, first of all, she was crying bitter tears. She was pouring her guts out, wanting a baby boy. It says that you pray with your lips. It says her lips were quivering during her prayer. Her lips were actually not quivering, it says they were moving. Nun ayin means to move. It could be wander, the Bedouin, wanderers who moved. Nun ayin means movement. Nun Aleph is pronounced the same way. Homonym, na, it means please. Again, it's like English. You can have more than one word that sounds identical. Red and red. Red could be a color. Red could be the past tense of reading. Tie, same spelling. A tie could be my necktie. A tie could be a tie score. A tie could be when you're tying shoes. And if you're going to expand the homonym to different spellings, you have THAI, people who want to go to a Thai restaurant. So you have it in Hebrew as well. How do you know which one? How do you know which Thai? Anyway, it says in Channah's prayer, her lips were moving. Mikan lamit palel, sheyachtoch b'sfatav. From this we learn that when you pray from a sitter, you must move your lips. Even if your lips are not literally pronouncing the words. Even if your Hebrew, let's say your Hebrew is really weak. A lot of American Jews do have very weak Hebrew. With very weak Hebrew, you cannot keep up with those who are faster. So you're doing your best to keep up, but you cannot pronounce every syllable and keep up with them. What you might do is you might be looking at it with your eyes, doing your best to every word, and you move your lips. That's why sometimes you'll actually hear in a shul, almost like a fly, a buzzing sound, because they're not actually pronouncing, but they're giving sound. Where does this come from? It comes from Channah. When Channah prayed, we'll see it in a few moments, she was praying, she was moving her lips. Eli, the priest, the Kohen, did not hear anything coming out of her mouth. She was inaudible, but moving her lips. So as I was saying last week, but now I'm getting into it more deeply, you see somebody walking down Michelson Drive in Irvine or Jamboree or wherever you are, if you're in New York on 42nd Street and 7th Avenue, Times Square, or as I say, wherever you are. You see somebody walking down the street, moving their lips, no sound coming out, you seem crazy. The homeless, the crazy, drunk. So that's a thought. You may be wrong, by the way. But Eli is that he's in charge of the Mishkan, and he sees this woman making a racket without sound, but calling attention to herself, lips quivering, no sound coming. From this we learn when we recite the Shemona Esrei. When we're davening, other davening, you can make a soft buzz. When you're saying the Shemona Esrei, no sound. It's known as the silent prayer, because Channah prayed silently. And you're supposed to move your lips, because she moved her lips. V'kola lo yishamea, no voice, no sound was heard. Mikan she'asur lahagbiya kolo b'tfilato. From this we learn you're not allowed to raise your voice when praying. Vayachsheveha Eli l'shikora. In a few seconds, we're going to read the text. Eli thought she was drunk. Again, you see a woman making a scene. Her lips are going, but her mouth ain't making sound. He thought she's a drunk. So what's wrong with that? Why did he stop her? Initially, he stops her from praying. You're not going to pray at this holy site as a drunk. She explains, I'm not drunk. Well, we'll look at it in a moment, but Mikan sheshikor asur hitpalel. The inference is, if she were drunk, she would have to stop davening. Consequently, we learn in the Gemara, a drunk may not daven. It's interesting. So if you're drunk, you're half drunk. You're not allowed to daven when drunk. Interesting. By the way, even deeper than that, a Kohen is not allowed to bless the congregation if he had nothing more than a single drink, even if he's not drunk. But if he had a drink, we have it in, let's take a quick peek in the Gemara. Let's just pull up an N here, Control N, and then let's get ourselves into our Samaria. And just so you should know, in Vayikra, the book of Leviticus, where you have Acharimot, it talks about, let's see, that's actually going to be 16 maybe, all right? Maybe it's 16. Acharimot. So what ended up happening was the sons of Nadav and Avihu, the sons of Aharon, the Kohen, died when they went into the Beit HaMikdash. It says that they offered a forbidden offering. It does not spell out what the forbidden offering was, but they offered something forbidden. And as a result of that, they died. And we are told that Aharon, that right before, the text says, right before they went in, they drank alcohol. And it does not say explicitly that they died because they drank alcohol. Nevertheless, it says they went in, they died, and immediately after it says, a Kohen may not drink alcohol. The rabbis learned from it that there's some connection between the death of Nadav and Avihu and drinking alcohol. And what they learn out is that a Kohen may not perform the Kohen service while he's got alcohol in his body. So in chapter 10, it says, let me just read you really quickly. Chapter 10, they walk in, and let's just get a few very quickly. Chapter 10, there we are. Vayikhu b'nei Aaron Nadav Avihu.
You're still showing Berkat 31a.
Oh, Denise tells me that you didn't have the screen up, so now you'll have it up. Happens once in a blue moon. Sorry. Thank you, Denise. Thank you very much. So it says in Vayikra chapter 10, Vayikhu b'nei Aaron Nadav Avihu. The sons of Aharon, Nav and Avihu, took a fire pan, offered the fire, an alien fire, Eish Zara. And what was it? It caused the fire get out of control. Vatochal otam vayamutu lifnei Hashem. It consumed them, and they died before God. Aharon's sons, he had 4 sons, and his first 2, Nadav and Avihu, died. They left Elazar and Itamar. And after their death, the Torah tells us that Kohanim are not allowed to drink alcohol. Where does it say that? Let's see if I can find it really quickly. Otherwise, I won't take a lot of your time. But yeah, it says just about right after that. Let's see if we find it real quick. There's a halacha or two. Yeah. Okay, I'm not finding it instantly. Take my word for it. I don't normally do that. It'll show up in a chapter, and but a Kohen's not allowed to drink alcohol. Therefore, on Simchat Torah, where the custom is that every man in the shul gets a Torah aliyah, is called up to the Torah, and afterwards the custom in all shuls in the world is that he then takes a shot of schnapps, like an ounce, no heavy drinking, just a shot. But it's like a common thing. So therefore, if he's called up to the Torah, he's had a shot of schnapps, he's not allowed to be like to do a Kohen service. He's not allowed to offer the Kohen bracha afterwards. Therefore, afterwards, he has to say the bracha in the beginning of the davening before he's going to do the daily the drinking of the alcohol. Okay, I don't want to tie you up looking for the Kohen thing. Just wanted to make the point. Take my word on it. Let's go back. So the Gemara is saying, Mikansha as sheshikur asur litpalel. A shikar. By the way, that's what the Yiddish word is, shikar. A drunk is a shikar. So a shikar is forbidden to pray. And we see, let's take a look at some text now, and we'll go back. So what was the exchange between Eli and the lady? V'hayaki hirbato, back in 1 Samuel, Shmuel Aleph. V'hayaki hirbato litpalel v'nei Hashem, and his Channah is intensely praying to God. Eli shomer et piha. Eli is in charge. Just like today, there's a chief rabbi of the wall. Just as there's a chief rabbi of Israel, the Ashkenazic chief rabbi, and there's a chief rabbi, the chief Sephardic chief rabbi, Rabbi David Lau and Rabbi Yitzchak Yosef, respectively. In the same way, there's actually a chief rabbi of the wall. At the Kotel Amaravi, he's in charge to make sure everything is spiritually and religiously proper. So Eli, the Kohen, was in charge at the Mishkan. He saw a woman ostensibly drunk, wildly gesturing, lips going all over the place, no sound, and he comes to her. Channah is praying from her heart. Okay? Rak sfateha na'ot. Only her lips were moving. The kola lo yishamea, but no sound, no kol, no voice was coming out. That's what the Gemara is picking up on that I just showed you a second ago, where we learn the precedent that we daven by moving our lips, but we're not supposed to make any sound. And Eli thought she was drunk. And this is exactly the verse here in Samuel 1 that the Gemara in page 31a of Brachot is discussing. So that's what's going on, just so you get how it goes. Brachot, the Gemara, page 31a, is lifting verse after verse from the text of the Bible and is commenting on it. Back to the text of the Bible. Vayomer Eleha Eli. Eli, the Kohen, then says to her, having determined she's a wild drunk lady, not endangering anybody, but making a scene, and it's a disgrace for a place this sacred and holy. Ad motai tishkarim. How long are you going to be a drunk? Hasiri et yenech me'alayich. Get this wine out of you. So that tells us, number one, that when you pray to God, you shouldn't be drunk. But there's more going on here. The Gemara says, from this we learn, Vayomer Eli at Matar Tishtakarim, when Eli said, how long are you going to be a drunk? Omar Rabbi Elazar says, Mikan lo orech l'ro bechavero, davar she'eno hagun, sarich lahochicho. That from this we learn that when you see someone who has a very negative trait, you have to find a gentle, safe way to reprove them, to call them on it. It's very uncomfortable, right? You want to be non-judgmental. It's none of your business. What if he's got a gun or a switchblade? But if you see someone do something wrong, it's a Jewish law, halacha. Part of what we learned the book for is not just to learn Bible stories, but to learn Jewish law and Jewish values and Jewish ethics, Jewish morals. So here we're learning the very, very touchy, sensitive concept that if someone does something wrong, you should correct them, to which I add, having studied these laws more, you don't try to correct them if it's going to do no good and just create bad feeling. If that's all you're going to accomplish, hold your peace. Be non-judgmental. But if you feel a correction might have a good, and if they'll take it the right way, you're not supposed to simply hold your peace. Give you an example. Many people would invite me to eat at their home for dinner Friday night, especially if Rebbe Tzanelin and I, Rebbe Tzanelin Zichrono Livracha and I, had already invited them to eat at our house. Now they want to reciprocate. Very awkward, because if the family's not kosher, we can't eat in their home. So they're going to go to extra trouble to get kosher food. But then you've got other families that aren't kosher and they're not. And then it's like, why? Rabbi, I heard you ate in this one's home and they did not have to buy special food from OC Kosher that was pre-wrapped and packaged. And you're making us do it. And we're twice as kosher as they are. So you want to avoid any bad feelings. So most rabbis, not only I, most rabbis have a standard policy. Either we don't eat out at any congregant's home, or we eat only in the home of someone who's known to be 100% Shomer Shabbos. They follow all the laws, no ands, ifs, or buts. Not just that they're not strictly kosher, but on the other hand, they're not strictly Shomer Shabbos, but they're strictly kosher. It just makes it nice and easy. And then what ends up happening is you run into gradations, where there's like an exception, with someone you know is 1,000,000% kosher, but it's a complicated thing. Okay. With that as background, we would get invited, usually avoid the invitations. Once in a while, we would accept an invitation if we couldn't get out of it. We didn't want to insult anybody. So we went one Shabbos to someone's home. Person was within walking distance. And we arrived there. Immediately, I see that the mezuzah is on wrong. It's pointing the wrong way. It's on the wrong side. So the question is, do I say anything? So I have to do a balance in my head. This is Jewish law. It's not just about me. It's about you. How would you do it? If you know the laws of mezuzah. If you don't know the laws, then you stay out of trouble. But if you know what's going on, you know the law and they did it wrong, what do? Do you correct them? Don't you? On the one hand, they invited you, your friends. You're going to start telling them how to live Jewish life? You don't feel comfortable, maybe. On the other hand, we're learning you really should. You really should tell someone the right way, unless you think it'll be taken the wrong way. So in my analysis, I'm at the house. They know I'm a rabbi. They know I'm a rabbi. So if I say it nicely and sweetly, I won't be creating a problem. They will feel a little embarrassed, but they'll be grateful the rabbi told them. If they have 9 people at the table, a husband, a wife, a child or two, the rabbi and Rebbe Tzanelin Zichrono Livracha, and let's say 4 more guests, then I'm embarrassing them in front of the 4 guests. So I have to find a way, if at all, which I did, to tell the master of the house, the mezuzah needs to be on the other side, has to be, etc. And he was very grateful, very grateful. So now we're starting dinner. No doubt the place is strictly kosher. He just did not know how to put on a mezuzah. There's such a thing as being non-kosher and knowing how to put on a mezuzah. There's a lot of laws, and he just didn't know mezuzah. So he starts to recite Kiddush, and he made 2 mistakes at Kiddush. The way he filled up the cup, I won't go into details, but I have to think in my mind again. Do I want to tell him? He's probably normally got the same people coming every Shabbos. He doesn't know what's going on. They don't know what's going on. So everybody's happy. So do I want to really bother him? And do I want to really have him feeling I really shouldn't have invited the rabbi? Look what I did. Now the guy's going to make me crazy all night. Well, maybe that's the reason I should keep correcting him so he stops inviting me. So, but we love him. So there's a lot of factors. And you have to decide the same. By the way, for your children or your grandchildren or nieces or nephews or neighbors or friends, do you want to be, on the one hand, you don't want to be ostracized and people feel, I don't invite them. They're such nudniks and they're so holier than thou and they think they know so much more. Well, then don't start because they're not going to take it the right way. But if you think it's someone who'll be open to hear, I'll give you a perfect example. The mainstream Orthodox world nowadays, we no longer eat Hebrew national meat. Back in the 1950s and 60s, we ate Hebrew national. We don't eat Hebrew national anymore. It's not that I can tell you with certainty Hebrew national is not kosher. No rabbi will put that in writing. And the fact that they won't put it in writing means, hey, if you won't put it in writing, then I can't assume that it's authoritative. So what's the problem with Hebrew national? Following problem. For meat to be kosher, first it's got to be from an acceptable animal. So it cannot be from a pig or from rabbits. Can't have rabbit stew. In Louisville, Kentucky, they eat squirrel. They have a thing called burgoo. Burgoo is like cholent, only instead of using flanken, they use squirrel. I spent a year in Louisville, actually was sitting at a table with someone eating squirrel. It's different. And then they start looking at how I'm looking at them. So would you like some? Whole thing. No, I'm a vegetarian. So anyway, I'm a Sagittarian. I only eat Sagittarians. So anyway, so first to be kosher, it has to be a permitted animal. Secondly, it has to be slaughtered properly. You cannot shoot it, cannot trap it, cannot, I don't know. You have to shecht it. According to Jewish law, has to be a certain kind of knife, has to be one simple slice. It can't be like a saw back and forth, has to have no nicks in the knife, has to be no pressure. You cannot press down. It has to simply be the slice itself that does it. All right. Now that the animal's dead, you have to check the lungs. If the lungs have any perforation, the animal's treif. Literally, the word treif means perforation. It means hole or rip or tear. If it has a rip or a tear in the lung, the animal's treif. You may not eat it. That cow costs money. Obviously, we don't buy a cow to slaughter, but a slaughterhouse does. That's an expensive piece of merchandise. You kill the cow, seems kosher. You look at the lung, it has a hole, it's treif. So every slaughterhouse has a deal with a nearby non-kosher slaughterhouse. The non-kosher slaughterhouses understand there's nothing inherently wrong with the meat that would make it unacceptable to the non-Jewish clientele of the non-Jewish slaughterhouse. Just that we are not allowed to have it because it's got a hole in the lung. No one's going out eating lungs. Even if they did, no one cares. So that's how the kosher slaughterhouses work in the Midwest, Nebraska, Iowa, to have deals with nearby non-kosher slaughterhouses. And every day or week, they're carting over a certain number of cows that turn out to have problematic lungs. Why don't they check the lungs? How are you going to check the cow's lung? You give the cow a CT scan. So you can't do it. So you have to kill it. That, by the way, that's the reason we don't have kosher giraffe. Giraffe is kosher. The animal is permitted to be eaten. It has split hoofs and it chews its cud. The problem is it has a higher than average rate of perforated lungs, and a giraffe costs between $25,000 to $30,000. So to kill a giraffe and then to find out it's got a hole in its lung, you're out 25 to 30,000 bucks, and most of the nearby non-kosher slaughterhouses don't want a giraffe. So that's why we don't eat that. But just to know, some people think the reason you don't eat a giraffe is that we don't know where on the neck it's supposed to be slaughtered. Just the opposite. You can't miss. Back to the cow. So you check the lung, and it used to be in the old days of your grandparents and great-grandparents that slaughter was decentralized. They used to slaughter in your neighborhood. Every kosher butcher was a shaykhit. In the backyard, he would slaughter chickens for you. People actually would bring chickens. They actually would go on the street in Manhattan back in the 1920s, 1930s. You'd go like the pushcart times. You've seen the pictures from Hester Street in the 1910s, the 1890s. You'd go and buy a chicken. Then you'd bring the chicken, not only in Fiddler on the Roof, you'd bring the chicken to your local shaykhit, and he would slaughter it for you. He would ask, do you want to watch? Usually you said no. And he'd slaughter it. In the same way, they would slaughter cows. And then they would check with their hand the lung. If the lung has a hole, it's not kosher, end of story. If the lung is smooth, it's kosher, end of story. The question is, what if it has no hole, but it has a scab? So lungs have scabs. You yourselves may have scabs, just like I have a scar. I have a scar from high school. I was playing field hockey, and Howie Weinrib, when a guy gives you a scar for life, you remember who it was. Howie Weinrib, he took his hockey stick for a slap shot. That means, for those of you that don't know the term, means to hit the puck really, really, really hard, a slap shot. He was not very experienced, and he missed the puck, and he hit my shin instead, and like a piece of shin started flying. And we had a big argument because scored, got past the goalie. So the question is, do you get a point for hitting Fisher's shin past the goalie? Meanwhile, I'm going, give me my shin back. So anyway, when that all finally healed, I have a lifetime remembrance of Howie Weinrib. It's very small now. You barely can see it. Anyway, but it's a scar. So lungs have scars. So the question is, where'd the lung scar come from? If it came from the animal having a cold, animals get sick also. So if the animal had a virus, had a cold, did not get its flu shot, okay? And let's say it infected the lung a little bit, it had to cough, such as this. Anyway, so it might have a scar, and that's okay, it's still kosher. No reason you cannot eat in the year 2022 an animal that had a scar in its lung from a cold it had in 2018. But if the animal had been grazing on grass, that's where grazing comes from. If it was eating grass and there was like a stick, some kind of wooden something in the grass, twig that it inadvertently swallowed, and as the twig went down the pipe, it punctured the lung, but it's only a little itsy bitsy puncture, and eventually it works its way out of the body. That simple puncture once in the cow's life renders that lung unkosher. The cow is treif, can't eat it. So it takes a certain level of expertise to feel the lung and know whether the scar is from a twig or from a cold. Again, if it's an absolute hole, there's no question it's treif. And if it's smooth, it never has been infected. The Hebrew word for smooth is chalak. Chalak. The Yiddish word for smooth is galat. Not only for meat. If you want to talk about a face and you don't have like a beard, galat. You want to tush a little baby's tush, galat. Galat means smooth. Galat meat is smooth lung. So if it's got a smooth lung after it's been slaughtered, what could be wrong? On the other hand, if it has a scar, you have to know what's going on. in the old days, the 1890s and before 1910, I don't know, before then. So the local sheikhet would have to know that. They made it there to be a slaughterer locally. You had to know certain stuff that you no longer have to know. Clive, the wonderful man who's the proprietor here in Orange County of OC Kosher, I'm sure he doesn't know how to check lungs. It's not part of what he has to do. He buys the stuff already sealed and certified, and he sells it to you. And he has to know some stuff. He has to know how to cut large slabs of meat, I guess. I don't know exactly, but he doesn't have to know how to check lungs, I guarantee. And what they do nowadays is they check the lungs in Iowa at the massive slaughterhouse, because everything now, time is money. Again, as late as the 1960s. Remember how we used to go in the 1960s? If you had a tape recorder and it was broken, you went to a Radio Shack, and for $10 or whatever, they would fix your tape recorder. Nowadays, if you bring a tape recorder, first, they don't even have a tape recorder, but if you would bring a digital recorder today, they also don't have Radio Shack for the same reason. They also don't have Circuit City. If you would go to Best Buy with a digital recorder and tell them, I'm here to have it fixed, they would look at you like you're crazy. They would say it's going to cost 4 times more for the time it takes to fix it than to just buy a new one. So everything changed in the economy. It no longer is time justified to really go checking lungs that carefully, the way they used to in the old days. So when you buy meat now, it's almost always glatt kosher meat from Clive at OC Kosher, from any kosher butcher in the United States. It tends to be glatt kosher. What they do is they have to check, time or not, they have to check the lung. And basically they're looking for smooth. If it ain't smooth, it ain't worth the time. Because then they're going to have to start analyzing the scar. Is it from a twig? Is it from a virus? They don't have the time. Time is money. The first sign of anything on that lung that's not smooth, they're just going to include it in the daily transfer over to the goyim down the block, the non-kosher slaughterhouse. Therefore, through the 1960s, we would buy kosher certified meat, even if it was not glatt. It still was time worth for a slaughterhouse to check the lungs, not only to check, but to check the scar if they found it. Nowadays, it is so not economic to check a lung once you spot a scar that we don't trust, cannot say with certainty, but we don't trust that it was checked properly if it had a scar, because we can't figure out how they could be checking them if they're losing money on them. So we only, and I don't just meet, when I say we, I don't just meet your rabbi, everybody now, it's only glatt, because it's the only thing that makes sense. Hebrew National is non-glatt. That's why the Orthodox don't buy Hebrew National, because there's something that doesn't add up. There's just no way, and they do more business, they do more beef than any other kosher provider in the world. Hebrew National, they're purchased by non-Jews. Well, if the Orthodox aren't buying it, who's buying it? The goyim, the non-Jews who feel correctly that if it's kosher meat, it's probably healthier, it's probably safer, because they're not worried about glatt kosher. They just don't want to eat mouse droppings. So they like the idea that there's a rabbi on site who is certifying over and beyond the guy from the Food and Drug Administration, because who knows who's paying off the FDA, but they're probably not paying off the rabbi. And so the rabbi is an extra layer of protection. So a lot of non-Jews buy Hebrew National, a lot of non-kosher Jews, they'll swear to you it tastes better than non-kosher beef. They'll tell you in a blind taste test between a hot dog from Farmer John and Oscar Mayer Wiener and Hebrew National. I don't know. I've never had Farmer John, never had Oscar Mayer. But that's important to know this stuff. Okay. So we're learning a lot about the halachas of glatt. As we're learning about glatt, we're learning the idea of, do you reprove? Do I go to someone's house and tell them, really, I've gotten to know you in our shul, and I've gotten to know that you're really very serious about upgrading your religious act. So since you're upgrading, I'm going to recommend privately, you might want to buy your salami and your bologna from Clive or from the following company. Maybe you don't want to buy Hebrew National anymore. And maybe you want to put the mezuzah on the correct doorpost, and maybe you want to point it in the correct direction. And maybe you want to say, fill your wine with Friday night Kiddush. So anyway, I do it my way. It's up to you. Don't look for trouble. Don't hurt people's feelings. But learn an important halacha. It's not like I should come home and I should say to Rebbe Tzanelin, Zichron Levracha, or now, Denise, I mentioned to you, by the way, for those that don't know it, we just are marking now our first anniversary. We got married a palindrome, 121-21. No matter which way you write it, it's the same, 121-21. So a week ago, we just marked our first anniversary. Mazel tov, Denise. So to last a year with me is, anyway. So it's like, I'm not going to come home. Imagine I'm at someone's house, member of the congregation, and I'm there for whatever reason. Whatever reason. And now I come home and I'm going to tell my wife, I was very surprised. They had Hebrew National. I didn't know that. That's not something I'm going to do. I'm not going to talk bad about them to my wife. And as the rabbi, I'm going to tell them directly in a way not to embarrass, in a loving way. And I can do it more easily because since I'm a rabbi, the feeling is he's a rabbi. He's an Orthodox rabbi. So it's more tricky when I get together sometimes with my colleagues. Once or twice we've been invited to the home of a Reform rabbi. And in that case, I wish they had Hebrew National. They have Farmer John, some of them, not all of them. And it's like, there's no point. But I'm going to tell a rabbi, Farmer John, it doesn't look right. You're a Reform rabbi. You have a beautiful temple. You should have at least kosher meat, even if it's not kosher. So you got to balance. And their attitude is, don't start Orthodox with me. Next thing I know, you're going to tell me I'm not supposed to eat on Yom Kippur. So you got to know who you're dealing with. Okay. So anyway, getting back to this. So the Gemara says, Vatan Chana v'tomer lo Adoni. Now let's see what that's about. So let's go back to the dialogue as we start winding down for the night. So he says, how long are you going to be a drunk? Making a specter of yourself. Hasirit yenech me'alayich. Get rid of that wine, or poor translation, sober up. Vatan Chana, v'tomer lo Adoni. And Chana responds to him. She doesn't just blow off the critique. She says, Isha kashat ruach anochi. I am a very bitter lady. I mean, I'm not walking around tapping people here on the shoulder saying, hey, I'm bitter. Hey, I'm bitter. But since you're prompting this discussion, I am I'm in a lot of pain. V'yayin v'sheichar lo shatiti. Wine, alcohol, I haven't drunk alcohol. V'eshpochet nafshi lifnei Hashem. I'm pouring out my heart to God. Al titeinu da'amatcha lifnei bat Belial. Don't make me out to be some kind of like idolater or a worthless person. Ki merov sichi b'chasidi barti arena. It's coming out of my guts from my anger and my rage and my pain. So the Gemara picks up on this. Gemara quotes this exchange and learns more Jewish laws. First of all, Amar Rabbi Elazar, Mikan l'roeh b'chaveiro, davar she'eno hagun. From this we learn that if you see a fellow person doing something inappropriate, like you think they're drunk, sarich lahochicho. You have to straighten them out. Again, using your own good judgment. Maybe someone doesn't know that his or her drinking is evident to other people. It's up to you. And, sometimes what do you call it when the family gets like a thing where they bring like 9 or 10 people and they sit around in a circle and they have my mind is going blank a moment on that word. I'm sure half of you are yelling it into a unmuted screen. But when they have a thing where like they bring the whole family together and they talk tachlis to the person. They say, like maybe at the end of class, I'll ask one of you what the word is. They have a thingy where they let them know that's the score. So it says in the Gemara, they're quoting, Vatan Chama Vatomer Lo Adoni. So Channah responds, no, I'm not drunk. Amar Ula, there's a rabbi in the Talmud, his name is Ula. U-L-L-A in English. We normally know it's a Babylonia-based rabbi if his Hebrew name ends in an aleph. If the Hebrew name ends in an aleph, almost always he's in Babylonia. And if the name is Rabbi rather than Rav, almost always from Israel. Rabbi Akiva, he's Israel-based. Rav Ashi, he's Babylonia-based. Okay. Amar Ula Vitema Rabbi Yossi. And then it was taught. Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Chanina. It was taught by Ula. And some say actually it was taught by Rabbi Yossi, the son of Rabbi Chanina. Chanina has an aleph, tells you he would have been in Babylonia. Rabbi Yossi tells you from Babylonia he probably relocated to Israel. Okay. It's very important in Jewish law. By the way, it's another halacha. You should know in Jewish law, anytime you teach Torah that someone taught you, you have to quote them. You don't just make out that like you're a genius and you know it. You have to say, I learned this from that. So sometimes I actually know it myself, but sometimes I heard it from another rabbi. I have to say, I have to give it's like you're not allowed to be a plagiarist. In the same way you're not allowed to plagiarize, you're not allowed to quote knowledge without ascribing it and attributing it to the source. That's a halacha. And you know where that law came from? Came from Megillah Esther. Because Esther told King Achashverosh, do you know there's a plot to kill you? Bigtan and Teresh, your closest bodyguards, are planning to murder you tonight. And I found this out from Mordechai the Jew. Later in the story of Megillah, in chapter 4, or the beginning of chapter 5, or whatever, the king cannot sleep. And they start reading from the book of memories, Sefer Zechronot, and they remind him of the time there was an assassination plot, and his life was saved because someone disclosed the assassination plot before it happened. And he said, who? Because no one remembered, but it had been written in the book that Esther said it was Mordechai the Jew. And because of that, he decides to reward. Did I ever reward Mordechai? No, you never rewarded him. Let's reward him. What should I do? Is there anybody in the baggage? Haman is in the courtyard. Call him in. How should I reward him? Haman says, how we should reward him. He rewards him, yada, yada. Turns the whole story around. So the rabbis learn out, one of the reasons that we were saved as a people is that the king was reminded it was Mordechai. And he never would have known it was Mordechai if it didn't say it in the book. And it would not have said it in the book if Esther had not said she found out from Mordechai. From which we learn you always have to quote your source. Okay. So Ula, some say Rabbi Yossi Bar Chanina says, Lo Adon Atabe Devarzeh, Velo Ruach HaKodesh Shur Alacha, Shata Chostani B'Davar Hazeh. If somebody accuses you of something that you did not do wrong, you actually should defend yourself. Isn't that interesting? It's actually halacha. It's actually halacha that you might feel, this guy's a kvetch, and he's accusing me of X or Y or Z. I'm not even going to, quote unquote, honor it with a response. So you have to evaluate. If it's someone that you should not honor with a response, because there's no point, so don't honor it with a response. Okay? If it's a kvetch, and it's up to you. But if it's a person who will have an impression of you, you really have it's a halacha. You have to clear your name. You don't have to spend a lot of money. You don't have to devote a lot of hours. You don't even have to persuade them. But you need to make at least one stab at it. Excuse me, you've got it misunderstood. I'm not drunk. I had no wine at all. I had no alcohol. I'm praying to God, etc., the way she explained it. And we learned it from her. So not only are we learning how to pray, we're learning you have to defend yourself. So if somebody says, I understand you did X or Y or Z, and you have misunderstanding. And by the way, if someone corrects you, say, I'm sorry. And don't have an ego. That's okay. It's beautiful to say you're sorry and go back to square one. And we're going to see that in a moment. Hachi Amrile, Lo Adonata, Lav ika shchina v'ruach hakodesh shkabach, shedantani l'chav chova v'lo dantani l'chav zchut. What is this business? So what are you, God? She said, what are you, God? You're judging me to be guilty? And you didn't judge me to be innocent? Milo yadati isha kashat ruach anochi. Don't you know, I'm bitter, she says. I didn't have alcohol. And believe me, if she were alcoholic, she could not have spoken that way. It was rather sharp. But if she were inebriated, she would not have been able to speak so coherently, grammatically correct, to the point. And it startled him. V'yayin v'shechar lo shatiti. L'nechshed v'davar she'en bo shetzarech lahodio. What I told you. From this we learn that someone who is suspected of something of which he is not guilty, it's not simply to hold for yourself that you know you're being unfairly accused, but you must inform that you're innocent. Okay. Altine et atmatcha lifnei bat blial. So she says, as part of her defending herself, don't take me for like some goy. The word Belial could be a wicked woman. It could be we're not using the word goy, by the way. When I use the word goy, it is not meant disrespectfully. I used to use the word Gentile. And I learned Gentile is actually incorrect. Gentile implies a pagan. Christians are not pagans, neither are Muslims. So sometimes I say Christian or Muslim, but that's two syllables. In America, time is money. And so sometimes we stick with one syllable. We say everything is valuable. It's like I used to call, Denise has a name. You can't call her by one syllable. Denise's parents actually, when they named their little baby girl, they decided we're going to give her a beautiful name that's going to confound people. We're not going to let anyone for the rest of our little girl's life come up with a nickname for her. What is a first name that cannot be nicknamed? And that's how she became Denise. You can't call her Den. That's like Dennis, Denny. By contrast, Ellen, I always called her Elle. My previous wife, I called her by the first syllable. My English name, David, Dave. You know how that works. Okay, so Bat Belial, I don't want him to think I'm a guy. Mikan l'shikar shemspalo, kilo oved avodah zarah. From this we learn, since she said to him, I'm not a guy, I'm not an idolater, and she said it after being accused of being drunk, from this we learn that a drunk is a guy, that a guy is a drunk, that an idolater, that a Jew does not get drunk. It's not part of the Jewish culture. That's it. It's not part of our culture. It's not a law, it's culture. Last part of tonight's class. So the exchange ended with Eli saying, I'm sorry, I apologize. Vayan Eli, vayomer l'chi l'shalom. But Kelokei Yisrael, yitain et shelatech asher sha'alt mi'emo. Then go in peace, and may God give you exactly what you're praying for. And so he didn't say, I apologize. I don't know whether they had the words today, the way you say I apologize in Hebrew, anim et natsel. So he didn't say anim et natsel, but he affirmatively concluded it with, oops, go in peace, and may God give you what you want. And so, Vatomer timsa shivchatcha chen b'einecha, v'teilcha ish l'darka, v'tochal l'faneha lo hayu lo od. And they part ways very pleasantly, and she's humming a happy tune. I just got a blessing from the high priest of the Jewish people. You are most kind to your handmaid. So the woman left, ate with a hearty appetite, no longer was downcast. She was whistling a happy tune. From what started as enormous grief, she was able to get a personal prayer and blessing. So let's wrap it up here with the Gemara. So Eli said, go in peace. Amar Rav Elazar, Mikan l'choshed et chaver b'davar she'ein bo. From this we learn a halacha, Jewish law. If you do suspect someone of a wrongdoing that he or she did not do, whether a criminal wrongdoing or a behavioral wrongdoing, sarich l'faiso, you have to apologize. It's not only that you're a 5-year-old and your parents are saying, now you apologize to your sister. You should not have said that to your sister. You're not going to have, I'm not letting you go XYZ until I hear you apologize. I don't want to apologize. You apologize. No. Apologize. No. I apologize. And you know what that was going on. So a halacha, you have to apologize. V'lo od ela shetzarich levarcho. When you accuse someone or suspect someone of wrong, again, it doesn't have to be a crime, just a wrongdoing. You not only should apologize, but you should end your apology by giving them a blessing. When the one who suspects must bless, and instead also to appease him or to give a blessing. So that's the halachas we learn simply from the prayer of Channah. Now, I want you to know, and you know this already from our other classes in the books of Yehoshua and Shoftim, Joshua and Judges, I normally do not go this small a number of verses per week. Rather, we normally do 3 chapters a week. And we'll be back at that pace next Tuesday, God willing. But for this particular chapter, it's extremely famous since we read it every year, Rosh Hashanah at the Haftarah. And it's so famous for its gemaras as foundational to concepts in prayer. So I wanted to show you how much more there is in the biblical text than its surface. And when you start opening up a Talmud, what kind of riches and deeper plums there are to be plumbed from out of the text. So that's tonight's class. As always, I first end the recording so that if you have a comment or